My name is Juliana Nykolaiszyn with the Oklahoma State University Library. Today is Monday, October 13th, 2008, and I am in Enid, Oklahoma, interviewing Mrs. Corinne Gooch for O State Stories, an oral history project of the OSU Library. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Well, we would like to touch upon a few things with you today. The first, we really want to focus on your father, Mr. Earl Russell, and then go a little bit later on into your life as a student at Oklahoma State and Oklahoma A&M before the name changed. But let's start with your father. Tell us a little bit about where he grew up in his early life.
Dad was born in Davis, or near Davis, and it was Oklahoma Territory in 1897. See, that was before statehood. And then his family moved to east of Duncan, out by Velma, and lived on a farm there. In fact, it's quite interesting, the deed to that farm, it was in two parcels of land, and they are both signed by the president of the Chickasaw tribe and the chief of the Choctaw tribe, which I'm doing some research to see if perhaps maybe we might be a member of one of those tribes. We're not sure, but I'm trying to find out. He grew up on a farm. He had a brother and 4 sisters. My grandfather was on the school board there, and the dad told me that their teacher, they always call their teachers professor, somewhat, and the professor just moved around and lived with the different people on the school board. So he lived at their home sometimes. That was a pleasant memory that Dad shared with me one time. Then he and his brother Jesse decided that they would lease the farm from their dad and run it on their own. They didn't take to farming too well. Dad loved to work with cattle. So he just went through the 8th grade in school, and then he decided he needed to work. He was great on that working, I'm telling you. And so he started working for Frank C. Ford, F.C. Ford, who was later my grandfather. And he worked for my grandfather Ford for a long time. In fact, Dad told me that my grandpa taught him everything he knew about cattle and about cattle buying and selling and trading. But he must have taught him a lot because he was really good at it. And in fact, that's how he met my mom. As Dad would tell it, he would say, well, me and 2 other old cowboys were working for Old Man Ford, and we had to move cattle from the east side of Duncan over to the west side of Duncan. And I think they moved right through the main street, because when I was a kid, we did the same thing. We just moved the cattle, just went right through town. I know that sounds crazy now, but we did. Anyway, Dad would tell the story, and he'd say, we worked so hard moving those cattle, and wouldn't you know, we ran out of daylight. And so we had to spend the night with Old Man Ford. Now, Old Man Ford had 2 nice daughters, and one of them got up and fixed our breakfast the next morning, 5 o'clock, and sent us on our way. When I got back home, I told my brother Jesse, Old Man Ford's got 2 really nice daughters. One of them is going to make some cowboy a wonderful wife, and that other one is just a living doll. And my mother was the living doll, and they were sweethearts ever since. Their friends called them the cowboy and his lady, and that was a good description of them. Dad was an outdoors man. Got up early every morning. Went down to the hotel, had coffee with the guys, went out to the ranch, checked the pastures, and came back in, went to the bank. And usually I was with him in the summertime. I'm a sole survivor of 3. And so we used to say that I'm Dad's only son. And I would go with him on those early mornings to the ranch, and he would sing all the way. It was funny because now I'm a musician, but no one ever heard him sing but me. He never sang in the church or anything, but he would sing "Old Faithful" and all those old country songs, and first time I ever sang solo, Dad had an auction sale. He and Mr. Bruce Ridley were partners, and they had cattle and sheep and hogs, livestock sale. And they got a new microphone. And my dad just leaned over and said, "Here," I was about 6 or 7, "I want you to get up there and sing Home on the Range." I said, "Okay." So I did. That was the beginning of my singing and musical career. But Dad really enjoyed the livestock business. And he told me that he and my grandpa, when they first were in business, they went into business together then after my parents married. And he told me that they would go out and gather up like just 2 head at a time or 3 from the local farmers and ranchers on horseback. And then they would get a whole train carload of cattle. And then Dad and Grandpa would ride the train with the cattle to Oklahoma City. And then they always sold them at just a private treaty there. And they had a name for that little train that went back and forth from, I think they had to drive. It didn't come to Duncan, but they went up to wherever they could get on that train, probably Chickasha, and then went on up to Oklahoma City, spent the night, and then came back. And it turned into a wonderful business for them, became very lucrative, and then as he, in later years, I don't know, I don't remember how old I was, but it seemed like forever. He went on the board at the bank, the Oklahoma National Bank, and was their ag expert. I can remember that lots of times Dad would, through the bank, help young men get started in agriculture, buy some cows or just a few head, and then he would go out and help them and show them all about the ag business. And I have had several men come to me later and tell me either that they stayed with it, but it became their livelihood, or Earl would tell them, "Now, son, I just don't think this is your business. I think maybe you're going to be losing money on these cows now, and so you need to think it through before you buy any more." I can hear him. That's the way he talked to people he liked. And I have had more than one gentleman tell me that he saved him by giving him good, honest advice, even though they still could have borrowed money from the bank, I guess. In his younger years, he and his brother Jesse were very close. And they stayed in business for a while together. And then Jesse went off to the oil field. And he became a very successful oil man in West Texas. And Dad stayed right there in Stevens County. My mother was from Stevens County people too, kind of pioneers in that area. And as I've told you about her father, they were cattlemen together. I don't know what else you want me to tell you about this part.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell me a little bit about how he got appointed to the Board of Regents?
All right. This, with all Dad's life, this is a good story. He said that Bob Kerr called him Governor Robert S. Kerr. He and Bob were great friends. And he said, he didn't ask me. He just said, "Earl, you're going to be on this board. I want you to be on this board." And Dad felt a little bit, really humbled by it, since he just had an 8th grade education. And I think he probably said, "Now, Bob, I don't know about this." And Governor Kerr just wouldn't take no for an answer. And so then he served under Kerr and Turner and Gary and Edmondson. I think he served under 5 different governors. Let me see here.
Sure.
I wrote them down. Kerr, Turner, Governor Murray, Governor Gary, and all the Democrats, Governor Edmondson. And when Henry Bellman didn't reappoint him, my mother was a little miffed. And Dad said, "Oh, I don't blame Henry. You know, he is a Republican, and you know, I am a Democrat." So, but he and Henry Bellman were good friends too. He respected Governor Bellman and thought he made some wonderful, hard decisions, especially when Bellman was senator, about the um, stop. I can't think of the name of it. The Panama Canal, when all that came up and everybody was kind of against Senator Bellman, my dad stood up for him and said that's what he thinks is right to do, and I think we should do it. I think we should support him in that decision. He loved that. He always called it the college. Mom, I've got to run up to the college, and in an interview with the fellow that was the editor of the alum magazine at that time, he did an article on our family. And Dad said at that time that he thought an education was one of the greatest assets of being an American. He just so believed in it. I mean, it never entered my mind that I'm going to go to college, but he showed it in so many ways. He was so loyal to the university, and he was always looking for ways and things that the university might become involved in that would help these young people get a college education. He was always for the underdog. Lots of times, I would hear him talk to Ed Morrison. Now, Ed was a wonderful fella. He and Dad were great friends. I don't remember his title, but he always came to the board meetings. He was sort of like the executive secretary of the board. And he kept them, told them all about what was happening and about the business at hand. And then Miss Helen, I don't know if her name was Sittle or Settle, but she was the secretary. She took all the minutes. And between Miss Helen and Ed, they kept those guys in line on that board. We laughed a lot about it. He was such a wonderful, wonderful gentleman and just seemed to know everything about the goings on at the university. And Dad would call Ed and say, "Now, Ed, I've got this kid here. He's a good kid, good folks, but he's going to need a little help going to college. And I want you to help him find a job. Now, call me right back." And Ed would kind of shake his head sometimes when he would be visiting with Mother and me about, how many calls. Dad would say, "Now, we got to take care of this. Now, I know you can do it. Get this boy a job, get this girl a job. They're good folks, just need a little help. And, we got to get these kids an education." And that's a little tender as I think about it. And then later, at my own 50th reunion at Duncan, two of my dear men friends came to visit with me, of course. Those reunions are wonderful. And as we were visiting, they told me that Dad had called them and said, now Saturday, son, I'm going to take you up here to Stillwater. I want you to see the college, and now you need to get you an education. You're a smart boy, good boy, and I want you to think about this. And two of them told me that he took them up to the campus, helped them get enrolled, helped them get a job. And that was a story I had never known before. And then later, at his funeral, of course, several people told me that. And then his nephew, John Ray Green, who still lives in Duncan and was a graduate of OSU, and his father was a graduate of OSU. John Ray told me that several of his friends told him that Dad had helped them in that way, and we didn't know it. Dad was modest in many ways. He was very extroverted, definitely, but then and there was a side of him that was a little modest about things like that. He really enjoyed his days on the board. He felt like he was making a contribution to something that was bigger than he was. And I've heard him say that. He and Dr. Bennett were great friends. Dad knew and so did I. Dr. Bennett was probably the smartest man we ever met. And they were friends in a very special way. Dr. Bennett really appreciated Dad's ag expertise. And then, of course, Dad really held Dr. Bennett in awe because of his intellect and his way with people. Dr. Bennett and his wife, Mrs. Bennett, were genteel, wonderful people. And of course, see, I was just 9 years old when I met them. And they kind of took me under their wing. They were so sweet to me. Some of my most cherished memories of childhood and growing up were going up to the college with Dad and being around all those wonderful people on the board. In fact, I still have a book that I read fairly regularly, a book of poetry and quotations that Mrs. Bennett sent to me when I had my appendix out when I was 13. I still have the little card, and she's on one side of the little card, it says, President's Home, Oklahoma A&M College. And on the other side, it says, we love you, Mr. and Mrs. Bennett. So sweet. And that's the kind of people they were. Dr. Bennett and Dad were on the same page when it came to education. And Dad would say that Dr. Bennett could go down to that legislature and in the name of agriculture, come home with bushels of money. And he could. He knew the importance of what he was doing, so did Dad.
So as a little girl, you remember going up to the college a lot.
Yes, I do.
Do you remember board meetings at all?
As I say, they had their meetings on Friday evenings, and then they would meet of a morning. I think it started pretty early in the morning, and meet till noon. And then whatever family was there that day, we all had lunch together at student union. And Mrs. Drummond and Mother were very good friends. Fred Drummond was on the original board with Dad, and they just hit it off right from the beginning. And Mrs. Drummond, I think her name was Grace, and Mother became good friends. And then later, when I pledged Kappa Gamma, their daughter, Mary Duff Drummond, was already a member, and we became friends. And so our friendship with the Drummond family, that was just a wonderful gift, side effect of Dad being on the board. And there were others, John Pat Carpenter and the man from, the man who was the president of Oklahoma Tech. He and his wife also were, remained very good friends. Even we would hear from them, or they might come by or see us even after Dad went off the board. And so it was just kind of a special gift for me, for Dad to be on that board, for me to meet all those wonderful people, and then go to school there. And it was really neat also to have my daddy's name on those cornerstones of those buildings.
And I'm sure he saw a lot of buildings spring up.
Yes, he did. When we first started going up there was the road right in front of where the student union was a dirt road. And the pavement seemed to me like it was just a blacktop on that street. What did you say the name of that street was? Washington. And it sort of stopped where the campus began. Mm-hmm. And then it was just a dirt road. And that dirt road went all the way north. In my recollection, it went north even past where the library is now. Mm-hmm. And of course, during Daddy's tenure, they built the student union, they built the library. And I remember hearing Dad and Dr. Bennett talking about whether they were going to use self-liquidating bonds to get the money for the library, which Dad thought they should do. He thought, let it pay for itself as it goes. That was from his banking background. And when they built the library and put the fountain in front of it, that was that was a wonderful experience for everyone involved with the university, but especially for Dad. He was so proud of those buildings, and they built the classroom building. I mainly the student unit and the library were the ones, of course, that I would remember the most. But I would hear him and Dr. Bennett also talk about football coaches and a lot about the ag program and the future of the university, of course, from Dad's point of view, through agriculture. But sometimes he was interested in music school, but not a lot. That was my major. And my friend was like, can't you get him to get us a new building? Good grief, this old Crutchville building is terrible. And it was. It was not air conditioned, and it was located right behind or south of the football field stadium. And across the street was the tennis. I think those tennis courts are still there, are they? Well, here we would be trudging into Crutchfield, hot, and to practice and to go to class or whatever. We see all these other people playing tennis. That was a little hard, but not too hard. I enjoyed every minute of my time at OSU. It was in some ways, I think it was, well, of course you have, areas in your life, sections of your life. I'm 73 and now I got quite a few sections. But I think that part of my life could be right up there as the happiest time of my life. So carefree and happy and involved in a lot of things. My mother always said, and so did Dad, try to give yourself to something bigger than you are. And when you get to the university, you realize that. At least I did. That there were, Mr. White was our professor in humanities. Andrew White, he was my favorite outside the music school. And in that humanities class, we thought about a lot of things that were a lot bigger than we were. And I appreciate that. I've referred to it the rest of my life.
How did you make the decision to go to Oklahoma A&M?
Glad you asked. My mother's sister thought that a girl should go to a girls' school the first year after high school. And so she thought that I should go to Sophie Newcomb, which is down near New Orleans. Well, I thought, well, maybe, okay. I had a lot of confidence. My aunts all had a lot of influence on me because I was this only child, and Mother had these 4 sisters, and they doted on me. I know they did. Anyway, I listened to this Aunt Lovey, and I got an application from Sophie Newcomb, had it all filled out with the stamp on the envelope sealed. Well, the weekend before I was going to mail it, we just happened to go to a basketball game up at OSU, up at A&M. And I think I took a boyfriend with me, but we knew everyone up there, and I'm sure my parents made sure that we got to see lots of people we knew. Although I promise you, they did not pressure me. They did not. But when I came home and thought it through, I just thought, maybe that's where I belong. I know everyone up there. I won't, I already kind of have a little, maybe just a little niche of my own special. And so I remember that morning, Dad never ate breakfast with us. He got up too early, but I remember taking that envelope down to the breakfast table and saying, I don't think I'll mail this, Mother. And she had a big smile on her face, and Dad did too when he came home at noon. And I've never regretted it, never.
What year did you enroll at Oklahoma A&M?
1953, graduated in 57. I was, of course, I told you I was a Kappa. I was an Aggie sweetheart, which means that I sang with the men's Glee club.
Ooh.
There were 3 of us the first year. And that was fun. Those guys were so much fun and so nice, and we traveled everywhere. Cy Perkins was the director, and he was my other favorite professor in the music school. And that was really lots of fun, and I sang with them for 2 years. Then I got married.
Where did you live when you first enrolled?
I lived at Stout.
Okay.
And it was the newest of the dorms. And at first, I lived on the third floor. My roommate was a girl by the name of Jan Smith. We had never met, and we got along great. She was from Guthrie. And just taking potluck was kind of a chance that we took, but it all worked out beautifully. God is good. God's looked after me. And Jan pledged Spade and I pledged Kappa, and we lived on the third floor. And it was a long way, you know, to get everything done. The elevator wasn't always available. And a room came, I've forgotten about this, but a room came available on the first floor in the corner. And so we took that room. Well, then, when our boyfriends wanted to come by and talk to us after hours, they could, which they did. Oh my goodness, I forgot all about that. But that was fun. I guess we had a little method in our madness when we took that room. But I remember there were some cedar bushes kind of by those trees, but they could squeeze in between and come and talk to us. We thought that was quite romantic, which it was.
Did you eventually move into the sorority house?
Yes, I did. When I was a sophomore,
Okay.
moved into the Kappa house, and scholarship chairman. And I really didn't like that job very well because I didn't like having to tell other people what to do. I guess I must have been pretty good at it, or they wouldn't have elected me. But anyway, I remember we had these study halls during semester, during finals. We would have our study hall over at the library. And all the freshmen and anybody whose grades were low had to come over there and study, I guess the weekend before final. But, you know, but I had to do it. I was in charge. And I remember one evening, all the girls were sitting down at that end of this big room in the library. And all their dates were sitting down here waiting, you know. And mine too. And I thought, oh, this is ridiculous. So I remember thinking, well, I'm going to take a chance. I may get in trouble. But surely they won't tell on me. And I got up and went like this. Let's get out of here. And we all left. Everybody was happy and no one told on me. And we did have to get the scholarship trophy. So that was worth it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Do you remember your house mother?
We had several.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we didn't have, the Kappa house then was where the Phi Gamma house is now.
Okay.
And we didn't have that drive around the front. We had only one entrance. It was that same entrance on the side. And our boyfriends used to call it the house with no front door, which it was. Anyway, there was kind of a mound of grass that was kind of mounded in the front. And the boys used to say that that's where we buried all of our house mothers.
Mm-hmm.
Because we went through so many. I don't know why. I wasn't, you know, I wasn't in the capacity to know how they hired them or fired them or what we did or why they quit, but we had quite a few house mothers.
Well, describe a typical date for us. You mentioned all these boyfriends.
A typical date?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, back in the time when I was dating in college, usually the date, the fellow made the decision of what you were going to do. I mean, it wouldn't have occurred to me just to say, I don't think I want to do this. Let's go do, you know, like we're going to a movie and that's really kind of what we did a lot. We went to movies, but we had dance hour on Wednesday nights. Have you heard of that?
I have. But I'd like you to tell me.
It was, well, the fraternities sent over all their pledges to our house. And then you just kind of lined up and you started out with a partner. And, you know, it was just a get together, get to know each other. But then I met some nice guys from that. That was a nice way for the gals and guys to get to know each other. But it was on Wednesday night. And being a good Baptist girl, I went to choir practice.
Mm.
Now, in looking back, I don't think I'd do that again. But I did. I went to choir practice, and so I got excused a lot of times from those Wednesday night deals. But it was fun. Dance hour was fun, and as I say, I met a lot of Sigma Nu's and a lot of Betas. it seemed like our house dated almost primarily in those two houses. And that was fun. Some of the girls kind of dreaded it, but I always thought it was fun.
Was there dancing opportunities anywhere else on campus outside of dance hour?
Yes, at the student union. The student union was just a wonderful place to go. And I remember, what did they call that dance? Dirty Bop. The Dirty Bop. And there was a Sigma Nu who could do it better than anyone I ever saw, but his feet were about that big. He could just go all over the floor. And that was really popular at school. And just the bop was, but we also did a lot of what you would call now ballroom dancing. The fella I was pinned to was quite a ballroom dancer, and he would, but several of the fellas danced that way. They would twirl us out, and then we'd come back in, and it was a beautiful dance, and it was fun. It made you feel very feminine, and ta-ta-ta. It was fun. And we went to student union a lot. And then they also, at that time, you went into the, I don't know what we call that area where we danced, had a jukebox, but then you could go across outside. I don't think that is available now. I think they've closed that on the student union. But it was an outside area where we had dancers in the spring. I remember the Kappas, I remember at least one dance that we had in the spring out there on that. It seemed like
Starlight Terrace?
Yeah, the Starlight Terrace. That's it, the Starlight Terrace. And that was a lovely place for us to dance. And then there was, you asked me this, I have forgotten all about it. Out by the lake, what was the name of it? Help me.
Theta Pond.
No.
Oh.
No, out north, not on campus.
Okay.
Mercury or Blackwell?
It was not at Blackwell. It was Sooner Lake. Didn't we have a lake named Sooner Lake?
Boomer?
Boomer Lake. It was Boomer. That was it. Boomer Lake. And maybe in a minute I'll think of the name. It was kind of a little joint out there. You could go out there and dance, and they sold beer. And I didn't go there very many times. I was kind of, I probably was kind of prudish. I didn't think I was, but in retrospect, I probably was. But when I did go, I thought it was kind of fun and daring. And another thing about our etiquette, they told us in our pledge class, now, if you smoke, you don't ever smoke unless you're seated. Ladies don't smoke unless they're seated. And you don't smoke outside. It's funny, isn't it, that they were giving us etiquette about smoking, and now none of us does. But I didn't smoke when I was in college. But we always thought that was kind of funny that they thought they could tell us all these things to do when we could do whatever we wanted to. But in our pledge class, we had a pledge, she was called a pledge trainer. And she trained us well. We had to learn the alphabet, the
Greek alphabet.
The Greek alphabet. We had to learn that, and we had to learn the history of Kappa, and we had little tests every once in a while. I'm sure all the sororities did that then. I don't know if we do that now or not. I'm still on the board of the Kappa, over at the Kappa house, and go over for meetings. And I haven't heard them mention anything like that. So, but see, then we pledged clear till spring. When we pledged in the early fall, and then we were pledges still, I think, until March. And so really, the pledge class, we really got to know each other because we had a lot of fun activities together. And then, of course, we went on our sneak. We captured the pledge trainer and 2 or 3 other members, and we went down to Texoma. Lynn Crockett lived in Durant. She called it Durant. And we went to her house, took a bus, and went down. It was a little inclement that weekend. We really didn't get to go out on the lake. We went to the lake, but we didn't really get to go out on. But I think there were 33 in my pledge class. And that was fun. And we wrote a song, and we were always singing. Everybody in all the sororities, there was so much music. We sang between our main course and our dessert is when we sang at the table. And you see, we ate lunch together and we ate dinner together at all the sorority houses, which is really unfortunate that they're just not ever together very often anymore. I think they have one formal dinner. I don't know how they do that now, but we had formal dinner every Monday night. You were supposed to wear black. So we had every shade of black there was.
Do you remember the houseboys?
Yes.
Any notable houseboys?
No, I never dated any of the houseboys, but some of my good friends did. Usually we had quite a few Sigma Chi houseboys because that was right next door. And I must tell you what the Sigma Chi's used to do. They would make their pledges at noon, go out and do a rain dance so that they wouldn't have to go to ROTC that afternoon because if it rained, and they made those. And we thought that was so funny. And so we would be eating our lunch like nice ladies do, don't you know? But as soon as we got through, we had a little balcony thing, not a balcony, but like a little terrace outside. And we would go out there and razz those boys because they were having to do this, as they would say, the damn rain dance. And but it seemed like we had a lot of Sigma Chi and Beta, because Betas were right across the street from us. Houseboys. Oh, they were always great. Fun. Full of fun.
What do you remember about homecoming?
Oh my goodness. I remember, and we still talk about it when we get together. I have a group of about 13 women who were in my pledge class, and we take a trip together every summer, every year.
Wow.
Sometimes it's in April. And so we have remained really close. And we still talk about that horrible gypsy. The idea was the float was supposed to be this gypsy. I don't remember what the theme of the homecoming was, but the main part of the float was supposed to be her skirt. And then there was the gypsy. And we worked on that thing. They used, I don't know if they still do, but they used chicken wire and they put all that stuff in there, and every minute, every waking hour, here we were at work with that crazy thing. And some boy had planned it for us and told us how it was going to work. How did we know? But we didn't then. Just the sororities did their own and fraternities, they didn't go together. But we had friends. We had boyfriends that helped us plan it. But it was a disaster because it started raining and her eyes were, it was the worst looking thing you've ever seen in your life. And of course we didn't win. And we thought it was terrible, terrible. And the first year, the year I was a pledge, the ad that was popular then was, I dreamed I did something in my maiden form bra. That was the ad on television. And the Kappa's thing that house decorations said, I dream we beat Wyoming in our made-to-form helmets.
Ah.
And we thought that was so daring. I don't remember if we won or not, but I do remember that line and how daring that we thought it was. So that was a fun thing at homecoming. And always, everyone had to have a mum. Mm-hmm. And your boyfriend brought you the mum, and you went to the football game. And you dressed up. You wore heels and hose, maybe a hat. And we dressed up everywhere we went. We never wore slacks, and I'm saying slacks, not jeans. We wore slacks only if it were really, really snowy, or maybe it had snowed and we were having to walk to class or something. I do remember one time it being really, really cold and wearing slacks, but gosh, by the time you got to the classroom, you were so cold you left your coat on anyway, But we wore dresses, we wore skirts, we wore lots of skirts and sweaters, and matching colors. The skirt and the sweater was all dyed to match, cashmere, and bobby socks were Angora, had Angora tops on them, and loafers. We wore loafers really more than we did saddle Oxfords. We wore those penny loafers.
Is there a certain dress code requirement?
No, we didn't have a requirement, but it was an unspoken rule. I don't remember anything about a dress code. I don't think there was one. We didn't have a need for one then. The most daring thing as far as dressing we ever did was, it seems like the Pi Fives got these, a lot of them got these haircuts. What were those haircuts called? They were shag. They called them the shag haircut. And then, so of course, a lot of the captains did too. I did, and my hair was pretty long at the time, but it was just real close haircut, and it was cute. It was real, they called it the shag haircut. And then they had the poodle cut, where you got your hair, you got a permanent, and there was curls, were curls all over your head. That was the poodle cut. That was about as daring as we got as far as dress code, The Sigma News had a big frontier ball. I wonder if they still do. They had their big party in the fall was the frontier ball, and everybody dressed up like cowboys. And in the summer, you kind of shopped for whatever you were going to wear to the frontier ball. And then we wore jeans and boots, and, fringe on our jackets, and the guys let their beards grow, which we thought was a little shocking, but they let their beards grow and became so masculine, for the frontier ball. That was a really fun time for us.
Tell me about any memorable classes that you've had.
Well, have I mentioned Mr. White's class already?
Humanities.
Class. That outside the music classes, Mr. White's class, it was a class took it my sophomore year, and it was for students who had, I guess, a 3-5 or more. It was a select class. I remember that, and I had just taken a trip to Europe when I graduated from high school, and so we went all over Europe for 60 days, and this was so fresh on my mind. And here, I grew up in Duncan, America, and so here my world's getting bigger and bigger. And that trip was the perfect preface for this class, because everything we talked about, I'd been there. But Mr. White really, he was an intellectually stimulating professor. And we had all those kids in there that were used to studying hard, and so the kids in the class were as stimulating to the intellect as Mr. White was. But he allowed us to have a lot of good interchange, in that class. I think Mr. White, I don't believe he was a doctor, but his name was Andrew White, and I think not long ago I saw over the student union where he had been voted favorite professor or something back then. That was right after my time, I guess, because that didn't happen when I was there. But we all just loved him. And I still to this day think every freshman, I don't care what they study, I think they should take humanities. It broadens your perspective so much. It makes you realize who you are as an American, essentially, when you get right down to it. All these things, led up to the Greek and the Roman law and all that. And I loved him. And then I loved Cy Perkins. Cy was my, for a while, he was my private voice teacher, and he directed the men's glee club, and I sang with them, and he directed my church choir. And so I was with Mr. Perkins a lot because I did a lot of solo singing. And Cy wore a toupee. And back then, I didn't know anybody had ever a man that wore a toupee, but we all knew it. It wasn't a very good one, really. And so one time on the trip we went to Paris, Texas, the men's glee club, and we three girls. And we were in this hotel in Paris. It was like old-timey downtown hotel. And Cy wore a hat, not a cowboy hat, just like a gentleman's dress hat. And he had laid his hat over on the table upside down. And some of those boys filled that hat with sugar. And so when Mr. Perkins put it on, we knew what was going to happen. He never said a word. He never even acted like anything was wrong to this day. Well, you know, whose goat that got? Those boys just thought they were going to just have the biggest, grandest, most wonderful treat in the world on him. Not Cy. He was too sharp for those boys. You know, he worked with boys forever. But that's a sweet, pleasant memory of mine that because we girls stayed with Cy on the trips. And that was so funny. And those boys thought that they were big-time joke players, and he got their goat. It's huge.
Outside of Paris, do you remember singing other places with the Glee Club?
Oh my, we're going a long ways back now. That was my freshman year. Well, we did Dr. Hairston, I believe was the symphony director's name, the conductor of the Oklahoma City Symphony. I'm pretty sure his name was Hairston. And he had a heart for the collegiate music schools. And he invited the Oklahoma University Glee Club choirs and our men's choir. I don't believe our symphonic choir went, but we would do a program every year with the Oklahoma City Symphony. That was a wonderful experience. And of course, we three girls got to go, and then the next year there were 4 of us or 5, and we did that. And all of our parents came, you know, to Oklahoma City to hear us, and we got to meet that conductor, and the conductor spoke with us and encouraged us and gave us a real insight to the importance of music in our lives. He wasn't trying to make us professional musicians, but he was reaching out to young singers and giving us encouragement. That was a really wonderful, wonderful opportunity, and I hadn't thought of it in many, many years. You're asking the right questions.
Well, that's good. Did your parents visit much, or did you go home much while you were in college?
Well, see, Dad was still coming to the meetings, to the board meetings, and so Mother always came when he would come for a meeting, and I would always go to have lunch with him at the Union. I didn't go home a lot. It was about a 3-hour drive from Stillwater. And the first year I didn't have a car. But Dad had a little Chevy Coupe at the time, 2-door. And I would bring it back to school a lot. I don't remember that they came after. Well, I guess sometimes I would just go home with them from the board meeting. But I didn't particularly want to go home. I was so happy in school, and I was really involved in a lot of activities. I just about volunteered for everything that came along, I guess, but I really enjoyed lots of various activities. And so I didn't get homesick very much, but I do remember one time I got really homesick. All of a sudden, well, you know how that feels. It's a terrible feeling. And all of a sudden, it just gripped me. I remember it well. And I just called home and said, I'm coming home this weekend. And by then I had my own car. And I had my convertible. And I remember that when I got in the edge of Duncan, this sounds so crazy, I was so happy to get home. I started honking my horn about 2 blocks before I got to our house. Then it was over. I was fine. I was ready to go back, and that was over. But I guess that's probably the only time I've ever really experienced that horrible feeling, you know, of being homesick. But I fixed it. Was able to go home, so I didn't go home too much. my parents were there fairly often. And they usually came for the games. But sometimes I sat with them, and sometimes I, sat with my friends. Because they had those 50-yard tickets, and sometimes I didn't want to be there. I'd rather be with the kids.
Did you attend football, basketball, wrestling, or just certain
All the
sports?
football games and almost all the basketball games. I never attended a wrestling match until after we moved to Enid. And then I didn't understand anything about what was going on. I was afraid those boys were going to get hurt. But the basketball and the football, yes. All the students, all the ones I knew, went to all the football games, went to all the basketball games. Now sometimes, the basketball games would be during the week too, on weeknights. And so we couldn't go to all those. We just had to study sometimes. And so I don't guess we went to all those, but we went to all the football games and some of the out-of-town games, but not too many. And football was not exactly fun and exciting when I was in school. We would laugh and say, okay, what's our motto? Wait till next year. Oh.
You must have been quite popular with a car.
Well, several of my friends had cars. But yes, I'll tell you a funny car story. My friend Naomi Lamb and Celia Wilkerson and I were all music majors. We were all music majors. We were all Kappas, and we all went to Baptist church together. And this is not about my car. This is about Naomi's parents' car. They had a 2-door Studebaker, yellow, and they lived in Stillwater. So before I had my car, Naomi always had a car. She could, they lived real close to the campus. I don't recall what business her father was in, but maybe he had another. Anyway, she could get that car a lot. And we always had all this music we were carrying around with us. That we just felt like we had it. Actually, I guess there wasn't any place in Crutchville for us to leave our belongings. There wasn't. For us to keep our music. It's always had to carry it. And we thought it looked kind of dorky to have a satchel. So here we were carrying the music. And I remember Naomi would pull up in that Studebaker. Celia would get in the front and I would get in the back. Every time I get in the back, they would both throw and say, don't step on the music. Don't step on the music. So that kind of got to be our funny little deal. And wherever we would be, we'd say, don't step on the music. Because there was always lots of music in the back of that car.
Yeah, I think that would be great. We're going to switch out the tape. All right, this is tape 2. Okay, just a few things to clarify before we move forward. You spoke earlier about a sneak, and I believe that's the first time we've heard of a sneak. So,
okay. Well, all the sororities did that at the time. I think the fraternities did too. But a sneak was, none of the members were supposed to know that the pledge class was going to take a sneak. And it was the weekend. It was planned ahead, and of course they had to make arrangements, for us to get a bus and everything. But they usually took their pledge trainer and 2 other members that the pledge class really wanted to take. And in retrospect, I really think those 3 members must have known it because, we couldn't just go in and bodily kidnap them. But it was a big fun thing, and we kidnapped them and made them get on the bus with us, and they didn't know where we were going. And so then it was a whole weekend, and different pledge classes went different places, but Lynn Crockett was a member of our pledge class, and she invited us to come down to New Ranch. And I remember staying in their house. It wasn't a real large house, but we had such a good time. And when we made up a song, I wish I could remember it now, and on the way home on the bus, we made up a song. And later, I think that song, that melody was one of the members already knew a song. And so she just kind of helped us along. And maybe the words too. Maybe it was an old Kappa song she already knew. But we thought it was our song. But all the sororities did that. And it was usually I would say it was probably in November. maybe late October. But we had been together long enough to where we knew each other pretty well as a player. And I think there were about 33 in my class. And that was lots of fun.
Now, earlier on, you mentioned about singing with the men's glee club.
Uh-huh.
Tell me about the selection process to be chosen.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to think if I knew Mr. Perkins, if I knew him. I don't know that I had ever met Mr. Perkins before I started to school, but I was music major. We were all music majors. And I had already been doing a lot of singing earlier, in high school and contests and all those things. And he just asked me. I think he was kind of like Bob Kerr was with Dad. He just said, "Now you'll be singing with the Glee Club, won't you?" Pretty much that's kind of what he was. And so there was I, and Naoma sang with us, and she lived in Stillwater, and she went to his church, and so he already knew she could sing. And she also was a really fine pianist, wonderful. And then the other little girl's name was Bondine Dodd. Bondine Dodd, I think was her last name. She lives in Tulsa now. And she was a music major, and so he had just heard us sing, and I'm little, but I'm loud. And we also sang with three other boys. We had a quintet. I don't remember if there were 3 or 2 boys that joined us, and then we did some 4 freshman arrangements. You don't know who 4 freshmen are, but they were the top choice of college kids at that time. They did real schmaltzy, real close harmony, and so we had some of their arrangements, and we did those when we'd take our trips.
One more question about your Glee Club days. How would you travel to events?
We always went by bus. And some of the guys, like if they had to get back for certain things, they might take their car. And I don't think Mr. Perkins ever objected to that. Nowadays, we have to be so careful about all the legal aspects of everything. But we really didn't worry about things like that then. And I know that there were some fellows that took their car. I remember, I think it was when we came home from the concert with the conductor in Oklahoma City from the symphony. A Kappa friend of mine was married to Glenn Lemon. Helene was her name, Helene Wright Lemon. And Glenn had taken his car down. I do remember that I rode home with Glenn one time, rode back to Stillwater with him because I had to get back for some big program or something, and he had to get back too. And so I do remember that he gave me a ride back in his car. So some of the boys had to take their own car, but we girls never did. We always rode on the bus with Mr. Perkins. And I remember that we went to lots of the high schools. I had kind of forgotten that. We went to the high schools of the kids who were in the Glee Club. We did a program in Duncan. And of course, that was good advertising for the university, depending on how well we did on the program that night. But anyway, yes, we went all over the state like that. And when in the spring we had so many concerts that I went from an A in that political science class to a C. And that's my only C, and I just thought the world had ended. Isn't that crazy now? But I did. Oh my goodness. But I just could not get up and go to those 8 o'clock classes every time when we'd get home from those trips. So that was a little bit hard, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Was coffee drinking pretty popular on campus?
Yes, and smoking.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And what are some of the places you remember being good coffee drinking places?
Well, mainly that Y Hut and the Student Union. And we music majors, there weren't very many of us. And we all kind of hung together. And so as soon as we get out of the theory class, we had to have theory class every day at 9 o'clock. And we went 5 days, but we only got 4 hours credit. And we would bail out of that theory class just wringing our hands and go down to the hut, my hut, and drink coffee. And Richard Snell, God love him, got me through the theory class. I mean, he'd go over with me and help me get what was right. And later, he married a Kappa too, and we still keep in touch. But we drank coffee a lot, and there were lots of smoking, a lot of smoking. And I remember at the Kappa house at noon, after lunch, the girls would play bridge, and they would sit on the floor, and there was a coffee table kind of about this size, and they would sit and play bridge and smoke. But I never did because I always had to go to another class. I didn't learn to play bridge until I got out of college. But I remember Mary Drummond was a wonderful bridge player, and I just remember her and several of the other girls. They played bridge every day right after lunch and smoked.
Well, tell me a little bit about graduation.
Okay. Graduation, I think it was like almost every year. It seemed like it was on Mother's Day weekend. I don't know if it was the year I graduated or not. But Dad was not president of the board that year, but he sat on the platform with the other regents. And Celia and Naomi, whom I've already mentioned, and I were all music majors, and so we were sitting together. So when we went up to receive our diploma, Dad stepped forth and gave each of us our diploma and a kiss. And that was so endearing. They had all been in my home, and we were the Three Musketeers practically. We were just almost inseparable, and Dad loved them too. And so that was a very happy memory about my own graduation.
Did your mother attend?
No. Mother, I think Mother just had an 8th or 9th grade education too. Maybe that's why they both believed so strongly in the importance of going to school, going to college. And I love to go to school. I would like to be taking classes now, but I don't want to take any more tests. No more tests, but I really do enjoy going to school, learning.
Now, your father received the Henry Bennett Award in 1978. Did you attend that ceremony?
Oh, absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about it.
Right. A bunch of our family attended. My 2 nephews and their wives, myself, my husband Don Gooch, and our 3 children, Mother's sisters, 2 or 3 of her sisters. It was a wonderful evening. And they had a beautiful dinner before the ceremony. At the Union, we all had dinner. They honored Dad at that dinner. And then we went over to the stadium for the graduation. And when they made the presentation to Dad, here's my sweet little daddy. And he's got on this robe and the mortarboard, and his legs were just a little bowed. I told you he was a cowboy, but they really were just a little bowed. And here his and he had on a kind of a light tan suit. And so here these little cowboy legs out from under that robe. I'll never forget. I have some pretty good pictures of it. But when he went to accept his award, he thanked them, of course. And then he didn't talk about himself. He talked about Dr. Bennett, about what a wonderful friend he'd been. And I remember he said, he was a friend to me, and he was a real friend to this university. And it was very touching and very brief. He never thought of himself as a public speaker. That was one of his kind of modest sides. But he made a very touching, moving talk about Dr. Bennett. And also, as a little aside, Dad's niece, who was grown, married, had her children, had gone back to college there. They lived in Stillwater. Her name was Marjorie Shaw. And her daughter still lives in Stillwater. Well, and her son, she has one son, daughter live in Stillwater. They all went to college at OSU. And Marjorie had gone back to college and gotten her master's degree. And that was the night that she got that degree, the night that Daddy got his award. Of course, all of her family was there. It was a love feast. It really was. It was just a shining moment in the life of all of our family. Of course, everybody's so proud of Daddy and loved him so much. And he had always kind of been a pillar in Mother's family. She had these 5 sisters, and they all just turned to Dad for lots of things.
I'm sure he felt very honored since
Oh,
he had such great
yes.
respect
Oh, yes.
for President Bennett.
Yes, and he was surprised and honored. And there was a gentleman on the board from Duncan. I'm so sorry that I cannot say his name right this moment. But I'm sure he was kind of the instigator of it. And he was a ranger and had known Dad forever. Of course, he was a lot younger than Dad. Perhaps I will think of his name in a minute.
Now, you told me a kind of a neat story about your husband's diploma before we started taping today.
Yes.
Tell me about your husband's diploma.
Well, I was married to Dr. Don Gooch, and he did his internship and residency in Houston. And then we decided to move back to Oklahoma because we wanted our children to be Okies and know their grandparents. And his parents lived in Guthrie. Of course, mine still lived in Duncan. And when we got out all of his diplomas and everything to frame them and put in his office, here was his graduation at Oklahoma A&M College. There was Dad's name. My dad had signed Don's diploma the year he was president of the board. And we never knew it, of course, until we got that diploma out. And Dad was still living then, and he was like, well, what do you know? I guess I picked a good one, he said to Don. But that was really, I can still remember sitting in the office and taking this stuff out of this box. We just moved up here. And we never had that diploma frame, you see. So here we were getting ready to frame it. The decorator said, now you need to have these framed in certain colored also. So that's how that all happened. And that was a wonderful surprise.
Now, your family really bleeds OSU orange.
Yes.
How many generations? How many in your family has attended?
Well, I counted 17, at least 17 that I know of, for sure. Nieces and nephews and me and Dad's nieces and nephews, one of his grandsons, and his granddaughter, my daughter. And then I just went down the list, and I thought, oh yeah. And I was amazed at how many there were. And just sitting here, I think I've thought of a couple more.
Oh my goodness.
But yes, he did have an influence in that regard. However, my son went to Baylor, and he just says, Mama, I'm sorry, I'm just a traitor. But I think it would have been kind of hard for him to go over there and be somebody else's kid. I don't know.
Well, what is it about Oklahoma State that sparks such loyalty in alumni and students?
What is it about Oklahoma State? There is something. It's almost tangible, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
When I'm over there, I feel it. I'm aware of I don't think you'd call it an aura, but it's there. It's something that actually, it's not like they drilled it into us, but when you were there, you just felt like it was the best place in the world to be. And you don't forget those feelings. Those kinds of feelings remain with you. Look at me. Forever, I think. And possibly it was, the loyalty is based on, well, I'm sure it is. It's based on those wonderful experiences that we had while we were on the campus. Not only educationally, but socially, and most of us, our faith grew while we were there. All the all the denominations had student centers then. Do they now? I don't know if they still do. I know
A handful.
the Methodists, I think, do. I know where theirs is. I know it's still one. And the Baptists,
Mhm.
they've changed the name of it. It was called the BSU when I was there, the Baptist Student Union, and I think it has a different name now. But a lot of the people I knew, maybe not most, but almost all the people I knew in my circle took part in those student centers. So we grew, our faith grew too, and we made these lifelong friends. And you know, if you have an allegiance to something, and your friend does too, then that just strengthens that allegiance. And there's just something magic about it. I hope other universities share the same thing, that their alums feel the same way we do. But that's how we feel.
Well, before we end the interview, is there anything else that you'd like to add that we failed to ask you? Anything else you'd like to mention about your father?
Let me just check my notes.
Okay.
One of the things that Dad always said was, let your word be your bond. I know that's an old saying among people his age, but I felt that's how all the men on that board felt. They were individuals before they got there. But when they got there, they worked hard. They worked together. And you can see what they accomplished. Told you about his friendship with them. I told you about Lou. He liked to say, you know, after all, I'm just an old cowboy. And then he would be in his suit, or like when he received that award, and he had on that graduation gown and cap, and he came a long ways. Mm-hmm. And I thought, recently I saw a documentary on Bob Kerr. You know, Bob Kerr was born in a log cabin. Dad was born on a farm. And Dad did not have any education to speak of. That's never going to happen again. Not now. No one is going to ever be considered to serve on a board, and that's fine. That's what it should be. But when you think of all the things that he experienced in his life, mostly positive, I'm really glad you're doing this interview about him, because I think he was a very, very unique individual. That's my bias, but correct opinion. But I appreciate you doing this interview about Dad, and I know he would be so pleased. And when I go back to the university, and Althea, my friend, drives me around the university and shows me all the things that are happening, I know he's smiling.
Absolutely.
I know he is. I know he's saying, attaboy, go for it. You know, think big. We can do it. That was always his attitude. Help the underdog and get better as you go. That was his attitude.
Well, we appreciate your time today and helping us preserve his memory, and also learning about your time on campus. Thank you so much.
I've enjoyed it, and I thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Sorry for the tears.
Oh, you're fine.